day I walked through those doors, through the doors of Bravo Battery, my life changed again. I mean, from that day forward, I would begin to understand an entirely new level of discipline, man. And when that distinctive sound of that door slamming behind me, a sound that I would get to know all too well and never forget, I honestly felt as if I was just sealed into a world of discipline. And it wasn't just a word. It was the air that you breathed. It was in everything that you did. It was a way of life. Hello everyone, my name is Bishop Freesh, and wherever you may be watching or listening, I want to take this moment to first thank you for being here. And if this is your first time stopping by, hey, welcome. Welcome to My Life Through Music. And what this is a project where I talk about the songs and music that were either there at the time or they describe the thoughts, feelings, or emotions I was experiencing at these particular places and at these particular times. And the song that perfectly represents these memories is For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, by the mighty and powerful AC/DC, released in 1982. Man, every time I hear this song, every time I hear a diesel engine or smell diesel exhaust, I am transported immediately back to Germany, late 1990. I mean, from the first slow, sharp, deliberate guitar riffs, I mean, this song doesn't just play. This song builds. And I almost feel as if I can hear something powerful approaching on the horizon, man. To me, that beginning, the beginning of this song always reminds me, it puts me in the motor pool or out in the field where I can hear the tracks of the howitzers just rolling and clanking on the cold, cold ground. Just massive, dominant, methodical, and virtually unstoppable. And then it hits, man. Those power chords, they explode like live fire right out there in the field, just bursting through the air with only the kind of authority that the king of battle can deliver. And that reminds me exactly of Bravo 335. And as the song rolls and it keeps going and it's got these explosive, iconic artillery explosions coming in towards the end, they come along the side of these screaming guitars, and then you got Brian Johnson's voice just belting out like he's almost calling out to us under the smoke and the banging and the booming. We salute you. We salute you. And let me tell you, man, that part really hits different, man, because I can't hear those words, like I said before, without thinking of Bravo Battery. So once again, for the second time in this project, I have to thank the powerful and mighty AC/DC for this awesome and intense song that captures exactly what it felt like to serve among those great artillerymen. Man, we did rock, and so did the ground. And to every artilleryman who served with me in Bravo Battery, 3rd of the 35th Field Artillery, this one is for you. For those about to rock, we salute you. For those about to rock, I salute you. I arrived in Germany, I want to say mid-November of 1990, and I had just landed in Frankfurt. I was 19, fresh out of basic training, and literally halfway around the world from anything I had ever known. I mean, the cold, it just slapped me right in the face, man. And once we processed there in Frankfurt, which took, I want to say, maybe a day or two. My memory's kind of fuzzy for how long we stayed there. I found myself in a van where I had recognized two guys from basic training. And one guy was actually in my training platoon, which felt good. and the other guy was in another platoon. But we all recognized each other, and it was a pretty long, relatively quiet drive through the country under the sky. This sky, man, it looked like it hadn't seen the sun for days, man. And I remember staring out the window, just trying to take it all in, just like Tom Sawyer told me, just take as much in as you can. And I was trying to do that. I was literally trying to make myself do that. I was looking at all the villages. I was looking at the countryside, the rolling hills, all the signs that were in German. And like I said before, man, the air was cold and damp, just so different from Arizona. And eventually, in the late afternoon, we pulled up to this small post called Peden Barracks in a little town called Werthiem. It was basically, as you got through the front gate, there was rows of buildings, I remember, on the right side. Lots of activity, soldiers everywhere, vehicles moving about. And we were dropped off right in front of Headquarters Battalion. And we got there so late. We got there so late in the day that the admin people, the PAC people, they told us that, okay, we would do a little bit in processing. We'd get as much as we could get done that evening. And then we would stay upstairs in what they called the transit bay. And what that was just basically this open bay where you had soldiers both in processing and out processing, kind of like in limbo. They were either coming or going. And then they told us that we would finish in processing the next day, and then a representative from our respective batteries would come and get us sometime later that day. So that night, and I'm in this open bay, and I think it was the third floor, the top floor. It was dimly lit, cold, unfamiliar, and one observation that I made that I'll never forget was that to heat the buildings in the inside areas, the heat was coming out of these weird-looking metal things. I think they were metal, and they were connected to the wall, and I think they called them radiators, and they made this kind of like quiet hissing sound. I hadn't seen anything like it before. But later on, I would learn that you could turn this handle on the outside, and that could increase or decrease the heat that was coming out. I mean, I grew up in Arizona, man. I had never seen anything like that before in my life. So that night, I'm lying there in my bunk, and I'm staring at the ceiling, just trying to process everything, trying to be as ready as I possibly could. But I mean, I couldn't even unpack yet. At this point, I was just living out of my duffel bag, new country, new people, new units. I mean, new everything. I mean, and I just laid there just thinking, and I just drifted off to sleep. I barely remember falling asleep. But what I do remember, is being jolted awake around 0400, not by an alarm clock, not by a banging on the door, but by a voice. But this voice wasn't inside the barracks. No. This voice was coming from outside. In the deep darkness of outside, this voice was bellowing through the cold and through the darkness. And I was woken up to this loud voice. Battery! Platoon! Attention! I heard this large group of men. They all sounded off together with, "No slack, First Sergeant, no slack!" And I shot up right out of bed. I'm confused. I was in a dead sleep. My adrenaline is surging. And I was like, what the? And so I ran over to the window, and I pulled back the curtain. I was, half confused, half curious. And down there in the darkness, behind the row of barracks, barely lit by a few dim lights, I saw them for the first time. A full battery, in formation, all standing at the position of attention in their PT gear. Just one unit. No one was out there. Just that one unit and that one first sergeant yelling and barking orders. And everything was just echoing off the buildings. I mean, it was the sound of raw command and unshakable discipline, man. That's what it sounded like to me. And I didn't know who they were. All I could hear was this loud guy yelling at them about, getting these barracks squared away, squared away before the next formation. He was just smoking them. I mean, he was like making them do flutter kicks and push-ups, man. It was hardcore. And it looked like basic training all over again, you know? And then later, that morning, the E5, who was in charge of us, he came into the bay upstairs where we were staying, and he told us to go to chow. And then, you know, later on, we would finish in processing, and then somebody from the batteries, the respective batteries, would come and pick us up. But before I left for the mess hall, I asked him, I was like, Sergeant. And he was like, what do you want, Private? I was like, hey, I heard some soldiers out back super early this morning. I mean, who was that? What were they doing, man? And he shook his head and he rolled his eyes, and he was like, you know, oh, those guys? Man, that was Bravo Battery. Those guys are freaking crazy. They're lunatics. They're led by this crazy first sergeant. It's almost like a cult, man. And they always want to be the first. They always want to be the best, the fastest, the loudest. I mean, they are really crazy, and they're annoying as heck. Nobody likes them. And trust me, you don't want to go there. You better hope you don't go there. It's an insane asylum. And he started walking down the hallway. And after he was down the hallway, I run to my pile of gear, and I'm opening up my duffel bag. I'm going through the papers that I got at, at battalion, and I'm looking, and I'm like, where am I going? Where am I going? Where did they say? What did they say? And then I saw it. I was like, oh no! Right there in front of me, clear as day. I saw it. I was going to Bravo Battery, 3rd Battalion, 35th Field Artillery, the same unit that sergeant was talking about. So, along with myself, 2 other soldiers were also assigned to Bravo Battery. And later that afternoon, just like we were told, a representative did come from Bravo Battery, and they came to get us. And we didn't just walk to the battery. We didn't just meander, talking about stuff. No, we were marched by a Spec 4, believe it or not, single file, down the sidewalk, a couple buildings over to Bravo Battery. And once again, we found ourselves standing at parade rest, not at ease, not standing around shucking and jiving, but at parade rest. The Spec 4 had not given us the command of at ease. And here we are, side by side, outside the first sergeant's office, and we hadn't even seen him yet. But everyone knew, you could feel his presence in the building. And I stood there just trying to listen for anything that would help me, to prepare me for what was to happen next. And I was thinking to myself, what is going on? I mean, everything seemed so freaking uptight. And here's why I was thinking this. At the end of AIT, we were kind of given this idea, and we were kind of told that once we got to our units, that, things would kind of calm down, because you had finished basic training, you would receive some modicum of respect. I mean, it would become more like a job. There would be some sense of humanism. But once I stepped into that CQ area, man, I didn't feel anything like that. Nothing close to it at all. It was loud, full of activity. There were soldiers everywhere. Everything was dressed right, dressed exactly by the book. I mean, I didn't expect it to be, totally relaxed. But I thought things would kind of ease up just a little bit. But that wasn't the case here, man. It was even more intense than I thought it would be. And it sounds crazy, but some might say, yeah, right, you only thought that because you were new, and I get that, but you'll see later down the road in this project, I will have plenty of experience to speak on this looking back. And even then, I knew that this, it just wasn't me. This was truly intense and crazy. And then maybe a minute later, this mountain of a man, he walks out of the opening, and he's got this intense scowl on his face, and he walks up to the Spec 4, and he goes, "These are new recruits?" And that's what they called us new soldiers, recruits. And the Spec 4 responds with, "Yes, First Sergeant! Outstanding!" And then he tells the Spec 4, "Go get Staff Sergeants X, Y, and Sergeant Z. Tell them I got some new recruits." Now I try to imitate him. It's not a very good imitation, but I'm trying to imitate him. And then there was a pause for a split second, and the Spec 4 didn't move. And then the first sergeant said, "Dismissed." And then, only then, he responded with a loud, "Yes, First Sergeant," and he moved out. He moved out quickly. And then our first sergeant, he didn't even watch the Spec 4 leave. He kept his eyes right on us, drilling into the three of us. And here we are, we're standing side by side, locked at the position of parade rest. And I was in the middle, man. And I felt like he was talking directly to me, man. And then he says, "My name is First Sergeant Grim Reaper." We'll just call him Grim Reaper. That's what we'll call him. "And if you recruits thought the basic training was over, let me tell you something." And he always began any dialogue with that. You know, whether he was talking to one person or if he was talking to the entire battery, he'd say, "Let me tell you something." And I'll divulge this. I'll divulge this. He was from Alabama, and he was proud, extremely proud to be from Alabama. And he continues. He's like, "If y'all thought basic training was over, y'all were wrong. Because here in Bravo Battery, y'all gonna learn the highest of standards. And y'all gonna learn to meet those standards. Check a hold." And that's more artillery slang, you know. It's a figure of speech. It's kind of like saying yes or no, agree, don't agree. You know, check a hold, he'd say. "This is the no slack battery. It always has been, and it always will be. That means y'all get no slack here. End of mission." That's more artillery slang. "Your section chiefs will be down here in just a moment. They will get y'all acquainted with everything and every standing order and every SOP in this battery. All standing orders and all SOPs remain in effect until told otherwise. Do you understand?" And we all sounded off with, "Yes, First Sergeant!" And just then, the three NCOs that he had the Spec 4 go get, they all got back into the CQ area. And our first sergeant, he took his eyes off of us, and then he said, "Staff Sergeant X, Staff Sergeant Y, and Sergeant Z. Here's 3 new recruits. Each of y'all get one. I don't give a darn who y'all take, but y'all get one. Get them up to their rooms, get their wall lockers and TA-50 squared away, and put them to work." And then he walked off into his office as the 3 section chiefs, you know, all together, they said, "Yes, First Sergeant." So my new section chief, and we're going to call him Chief for the project, like everybody else did. That's what we called section chiefs, just Chief for short. And he didn't say a word when he saw me. He walked over to me, and he pointed at me, and he just kind of said, "Come here." And so he tilted his head like as if to say, "Follow me." And so I followed him up the stairs into the platoon area, down this long hallway, all past the movement, all past the cleaning, all past the yelling and all the commotion, all the way down almost to the end where it was kind of quieter. And we got a few feet from where my door was going to be, my new room was going to eventually be. And then he turned around, he put his hands on his hips, and he looked right at me, very calm and kind of grinning. And he says, "Pretty wild around here, huh?" And I felt my eyes just get wide as I was like, just kind of to agree. I was like, and he goes, "You nervous?" And I kind of cleared my throat, and I was like, "I guess, kind of." He's like, "It's not what you expected, huh?" And I didn't really answer. I just kind of shrugged my, shoulders, kind of like a half shrug, like, "I guess." I didn't know what to say. And then he stepped closer and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "This place is different from any place I've ever been in my career. This place is crazy, but you follow my lead, you do exactly as I tell you, and you listen to the guys in our section, you're going to be fine. Got it?" And I was like, "Got it." He's like, "I ain't going to let nothing happen to you, man. Don't worry. I got you." And I kid you not, man, that evening, I had a TA-50 layout, a TA-50 inspection, section level and platoon level, wall locker inspection, and later on, I found myself painting the walls in our hallway of our platoon area until late into the night, man. And we hadn't even started the routine of pressing our uniforms or shining our boots for the next day yet. I must say, my roommates, they were very cool. They were very helpful. They did get me squared away. They gave me a lot of advice. They showed me a lot of stuff. They were very cool. And they had to, because in a couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks later, our battalion was going to this little old place called Grafenvohr, the Grafenvohr training area. And a lot of people just called it Graf for short. They called it Grafenvohr. But it was a training area where you did live fire and you just did it all. It was like NTC in the States. And until you had at least one graph under your belt, you weren't part of anything. You weren't considered part of the battery. And I understood that. And, and that's kind of true in a lot of cases, because I hadn't earned anything yet. I hadn't proven myself. I hadn't gained any respect. They didn't know who I was or how I worked. So I kind of got that. There are many different kinds of leadership. And if you follow me in this project, over time, you're going to see that I will be exposed to all kinds of leadership, all leadership styles, both in the military and as well as outside the military. And it was a blessing to be exposed to all those styles. I'm still exposed to those, different styles today. But here's a guy, our first sergeant. This was the first kind of authority I was exposed to for a long period of time in this unit. He had a very authoritarian style. There was no room for question, no room for debate, no deviation for any of his orders. And he never moved off that for the whole time that he was in charge of our battery, And so here we are, myself, the two guys that came to Bravo Battery with me. One guy came to the same platoon that I did. We were in 1st Platoon. He went to 3rd Section. I went to 2nd Section. And the other guy, he went to 2nd Platoon. And we found ourselves right out of basic training to a place that was literally just as intense as basic training, or even some cases even more intense. I mean, it really was crazy at times. And again, I'll touch a little bit back on that as I go through and I talk about my time there. But this was a very unique unit at a unique place and a unique time with a unique leadership in place. I mean, the guys in Alpha Battery and Charlie Battery, they didn't want anything to do with us, or how we did things. I mean, in some ways, they actually kind of felt sorry for us in some bizarre way, because he just worked the dog snot out of us, man. But after a while, to us, it became normal, and it started to make sense. It became a part of us to the point where, at least for me, we didn't have to question it anymore. We didn't have to analyze it. We didn't have to complain about it. We had come to the realization that this was the way it is in this battery. This is the way of life in this battery. And it was making us better. No matter how hard it was, it was making us better people, better artillerymen, better soldiers. It was making us better, and we hated it. But it became our baseline. Not because it was the easiest, but that was the way Bravo Battery did things. And it was dictated by our first sergeant. And from the outside, you could look at it and be like, yeah, man, that looks crazy. That way of life may have looked extreme. It might have looked like an obsession or even insanity. And people might ask, well, why would anybody live like that? Because to them, on the outside, they don't see purpose. On the outside, they see punishment. They don't see discipline. They see restriction. They don't see devotion. They see almost like delusion. And, for somebody on the outside looking in, it's like, that's just too much. But if you're on the inside, it becomes, hey, that's how we live. On the outside, they're like, don't you guys have time for fun? And on the inside, you're like, this is actually fulfilling. On the outside, hey, why wake up that early? On the inside, because the mission starts before the sun. On the outside, hey, you're taking things too seriously. On the inside, no, because everything matters. You guys are just brainwashed. No, actually, I'm disciplined. You guys are missing out on so much. And on the inside, in a strange way, you have no idea what I found. So what I'm saying is that over time, the abnormal becomes normal. And it isn't just about military life. It's about every aspect of life that is shaped by intensity, focus, and discipline. It isn't weird. It's just a way. So what's the point? Well, sometimes environment can shape perspective. Exposure can build normalcy. And discipline can build transformation. And it can make you better. But the beauty is you choose. I mean, in the military, we didn't have that choice. In that unit, we didn't have the choice. But in life, you can choose your normal. You can choose what is normal in your life. And if it's intense, then it's intense. If it's not, then it's not. You don't need to be in the military to build a life rooted in purpose, discipline, clarity, or conviction. You don't need to be in the military to have a code to live by. You can build your life around any combination of the things I was talking about. If it fits and it complements your life, I mean, you're the creator. You make it. You make the structure. You're the designer. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do in life. You know, I believe you should have a standard. And you should have a standard to virtually everything that you do. And it might sound crazy, but you should have a standard. And it should be high. You should be honest with yourself at the end of every day when you evaluate whether or not you met that standard. And then, if you haven't, then it's up to you to make the necessary changes so that you do make the standard the next time. That's one way we get better, one of the many ways we get better. And I'm sure I'll go deeper into that down the road. But for now, what normal seems to one person can be something completely different to another. And again, if you follow this story long enough, you'll see how that first sergeant and being in Bravo Battery actually helped me in many, many ways. And you'll also see how I allowed, I'll say that again, I allowed it to kind of work against me in other ways. And you'll see what I'm talking about. And these are the reasons why I have to thank the mighty and powerful AC/DC once again for the second time in this project for a song that gives me such a clear and vivid visual of this time in my life. And to every artilleryman who served with me in Bravo Battery, 3rd Battalion, 35th Field Artillery, man, these guys, they were great soldiers. They were great men. They were great artillerymen. They weren't just good. They were well-trained, disciplined, and sharp. And as much as I hate to say it, it was all because of our first sergeant, man. I mean, he was the kind of guy you loved to hate. But you hated to love because he made you better. He made you better. We were the first in line. We were the first to train, the first to move, first to communicate, first to fire. We were motivated by pride, held together by purpose. Man, we were more than a unit. We were a force of nature. So Bravo 335, this one's for you. I'll put a link to it in the description below in case you want to check it out right now. For those about to rock, if you want to check it out right now, go to it. Or you can go to it any other way that you access your music today. But when you do, go to it. I think you'll understand exactly what I'm trying to say. It was the last weekend before Graph, and we were left alone. Believe it or not, our first sergeant didn't come in that weekend and tear us all up. And it was crazy, man. I felt like I was back in Tempe or back in Tucson or up in Flagstaff in the dorms with Tom Sawyer on a wild and crazy Saturday night, man. It was wild. So I'll be talking about that along with a little more the next time I talk about my life through music. As always, thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. First, thank you for taking the time to be here. And hello, everyone. My name is Bishop Friesch, and wherever you are, and you should be honest with